So, as you can see from the title, today we're looking into why people seem to be just a little bit mixed online and in the discussions about the GH6. Everyone I think that's got their hands on the camera and has actually used it have a lot better understanding of what it can do and what are the advantages, and they seem to really love it. And honestly, if you need the features, the specific features that that camera offers, you probably already have it ordered. But today I really want to look at the trends I've seen and provide my sort of armchair analysis of all the armchair experts out there to really just dig into why the GH6 has had the reception that it has, because there are some real criticisms with the camera and even faults with the camera that it's kind of hard to argue. So to start this sort of conversation off, I want to talk about one of my hobbies outside of the camera world: board games. Now, board games often come with expansions, right? Just to give you more of the game that you like and to expand the mechanics. There's basically two types of expansion, right? One of those two basic types is what would be called a more stuff expansion, kind of like this one for Champions of Midgard. So this expansion is sort of like, you liked the game that's about 2 to 4 players fighting 2 types of monsters with 3 types of dice. So how about if instead of 4, it was a 5-player game? What if instead of fighting 2 types of monsters, it was 3 types of monsters? And what about instead of 3 types of warrior dice, there was 4? Otherwise, whatever you liked about the game before, here's more of it, which it does have its value, don't get me wrong. This would be kind of like those incremental upgrades that people generally don't tend to love in the camera world. Maybe think about going from like the GH5 to the GH5 Mark II. Sure, that is an upgrade, but it is kind of just like a more stuff upgrade, if that makes any sense. The other expansion I own for Champions of Midgard is a lot different. Is this right side up? No. So this is not a more stuff expansion. This one adds the same stuff, you know, new dice, new monsters, all that kind of stuff, but it also adds entirely, oh, it was right the first time, wasn't it? It adds an entirely new mechanic where your soldiers that fall in battle go to Valhalla and fight against crazy monsters in the afterlife and continue to help you in your struggle to become the boss of this town. Whatever, that isn't exactly super important. The thing is, it offers tons of brand new, shiny things like those new dice, those new mechanics, new items you get from the afterlife, and all your, characters have a special ability now. Brand new, shiny features that get people excited. So now you've had your more stuff, well, how about different stuff? With every new GH series camera, this was also the case. It did have those more stuff elements, as well as 1 or 2 of those game-changing, shiny new features, right? So the GH2, for example, it was able to be hacked and unlocked some crazy, in fact, some of the highest bit rates you could get at the time. And the GH3 jumped up again and made all those hacks official and a little bit more stable, which was great. The GH4 was actually the first mirrorless camera ever, with interchangeable lenses at least, to shoot 4K in the body, and it was kind of amazing. And of course the GH5 was one of the early adopters of the internal image stabilization system, or IBIS, aside from like Olympus, and I think that might be it actually. It was also a 10-bit camera, but we'll talk about that more later. Each camera had 1 or 2 super identifiable and easily understandable headline features, and that sort of leads us into the GH6. The GH6, let's be clear, is pretty much better in nearly every way from an evolutionary standpoint. Even if I did make that video about the 10 things the GH5 does better than the GH6, it did take all 3 models of GH5, and one of the points was kind of wrong because of the battery thing, but so for example, the 4K 60 has turned into 5.7K 60. The 4K 60 8-bit has also turned into 4K 120 10-bit. The colors are better, AF is better, still kind of not great, but basically everything is better. All of the old stuff, the old camera, this one has it too, and is giving you more of everything you love about the old camera, just that little bit more. So what about that headline feature? The new stuff, the game-changing stuff. Well, what do you guys think as being the headline feature of the GH6? I definitely think there are a few things that you could make arguments for being a headline feature, like maybe ProRes and a few other things like that, but I would have to say the main one for me, and the main one that reviewers and Panasonic themselves seem to be pushing, would be that dynamic range boost. It's a really great feature, honestly, and especially at this price point, and it levels up this camera system and this format and pushes the image quality and dynamic range right up there just below some of the best full-frame cameras from anyone. Panasonic, Canon, Sony, anybody, especially because usually that's going to be for a fraction of the price of something like the A1 or the S1H. So what exactly is the issue here? Well, I think it's a lack of understanding of what this feature can do, what it is, how to use it, and even Panasonic is having trouble explaining this new feature to people, and I get it. Even I don't get the full grasp of the concept, and it really seems like you need to just get your hands on with one of these cameras to fully realize how big this extra dynamic range can help in certain situations. I mean, it's a full stop in the highlights. That's like where you want the dynamic range, right? Well, it's just a weird concept. Very few cameras have had it or implemented it before, and it's a little bit obtuse and hard to understand. And the fact that most people don't fully grasp the concept of it, especially if they're already happy with the performance of the dynamic range on the GH5 or even the GH5S, which is very good, this might be solving a problem they don't have. So quickly, let's look again back at the old cameras. The GH3 to the GH4, 1080p to 4K. Huge jump. Immediately noticeable jump. GH4 to GH5 turned an 8-bit camera into a 10-bit camera with that amazing IBIS, which at that point hadn't been topped by anybody except Olympus, and still hasn't been topped by anybody except like the most expensive Canon and Sony cameras in the last year or so. So that you move to the GH5 to the GH6, better dynamic range in certain modes that has some limitations, that has some drawbacks, like having to shoot at 2000 ISO minimum and maybe some more noise, maybe not. Some of those compromises and issues and quirks either don't seem worth it, or like I said earlier, solve a problem that people weren't having with these cameras, with their GH5, with their GH5 Mark II. So why bother trying to work around this new feature, work this into their workflow when they don't understand it and it might not even be important to them? And don't get me wrong, this has kind of happened with pretty much every model of camera that Lumix has released. People back in the day wondered why they should upgrade to the GH3 since a hacked GH2 wasn't much different. People questioned why they should get the GH4 when the GH3 had pretty much everything it had, and 4K was not super prevalent at the time, and even to this day only about 50% of people view stuff on 4K monitors or even have a 4K TV. And honestly, a few serious filmmakers were not super impressed by the GH5s since IBIS wasn't a big deal for their work, and even for high-end productions kind of messes up things with how you might rig it. And this whole way along the way, the autofocus has just been incrementally increased and never really made super usable when compared to the competition. The autofocus, it's been a whole deal with the autofocus pretty much since day one. But I'd say the autofocus discussion really kicked in at the time of the GH5 when there were other video cameras starting to come out that could do pretty good autofocus in video. This is just a cycle that kind of repeats over and over again with Panasonic or most cameras, honestly. The camera comes out, it's slightly or moderately improves almost every aspect of the camera with that one headline feature that tons of people are excited for, but just as many people don't understand or don't care about it. The GH6 is no different, but that headline shiny new stuff feature or features just aren't as exciting or easy to understand, so The dislike and lack of willingness to upgrade seems just a little bit more pronounced than in the past, at least from my memory. But it honestly might be just about the same. There's also just the, I guess, general state of cameras and video. I mean, back with the GH5 and GH5S, not really any full frame cameras from other companies really came close to what Panasonic could do. I mean, think about Sony's IBIS and Colors or things like that. Panasonic could just blow these companies out of the water for just the raw specs and features, but now many full-frame cameras are getting close or even exceeding what Lumix can do for the first time in a long time or even ever, but most of the time for quite a bit more money. Another factor to consider is Lumix have their own full-frame cameras, which will definitely slightly edge out the GH6 for sort of like maximum image quality, low light, etc., but only slightly, and again for usually more money. So yes, the GH line has more competition than ever, even from Panasonic themselves, and some of the upgrades seem more minor than ever, but honestly, they only might be that minor seeming because of how far ahead of their time Lumix has been up to this point. I mean, we're just kind of getting to a plateau of what certain camera companies and brands can realistically do given the current technology, and it's just the reality of things. I mean, just think of how hard it is to go from 1080 to 4K or 4K to 6K. I mean, the increments keep seeming smaller, but the R&D, time, money, and research that goes in to edging out just like one more stop of dynamic range or one more stop of IBIS is probably more research, or just as much research as came into developing internal image stabilization in the first place. But we're way less impressed because going from 0 to 100 for image stabilization is incredible, but going from like 100 to like 125, it's just not as flashy, you know? Anyway, in the interest of keeping this video a little shorter than it otherwise could have been, I know this is probably, how long have we been recording? Like, oh God. Yeah, I hope this helped you and explain some of the discourse surrounding this new camera, which I still don't have, and was also a fun little history lesson of how the GH series happened and their perception at the time of their release. I definitely found it really interesting to go back and watch guys like DP Review and all their reviews talking about the GH3, GH4, GH5, GH6, and seeing how much of a cycle this is and how similar those discussions could be from back in the day, both from the reviewers and from the comments, which do echo a lot of what we're seeing today. If you liked this video, I know it's no B-roll, just me talking, but if you liked it, go ahead and make it official. Hit that like button or even that subscribe button if you want to be notified. And also, if you want to be the ultimate super fan, go check out my Patreon in the description. I just started it out. There's some fun stuff there. Help me afford a GH6 so I can make more videos on it, or just keep making videos in the future. It is fun. I do love it, but damn, it's time consuming. And at the end of the day, we all got bills to pay. Any little bit will help out, and we're gonna do some fun stuff over there. Anyway, thanks guys for stopping by, and I will see you guys in the next video.